In the blistering summer of 1985, 7 children vanished from Camp Echo. One morning their beds were still made, breakfast untouched, their voices swallowed by the woods and water. No struggle, no trace, only a single word scratched into the side of a drifting canoe. Come. For decades, Lake Echo kept its secret, stretching silent and dark beneath the Oregon pines. It wasn't until the summer of 2023 that nature intervened. A historic drought drained the reservoir to dust, revealing not just the cracked skeleton of a lake bed, but something buried beneath, forgotten, waiting. Jeremy Aker had served as a ranger with Oregon Parks for 20 years. He'd seen wildfires, storms, landslides, but this was different. The ground beneath his boot cracked loudly as he stepped into the dry basin where Lake Echo used to be. Deep creases stretched across the brittle earth like veins under a pale skin. The old dock leaned like a broken limb, and what remained of Camp Echo sat withering half a mile up the ridge, choked by moss and silence. The cabins were ruins, and the chapel was little more than a ghost in lumber and ivy. The official story had always been budget cuts, but everyone in town knew it was fear. Then he saw it. Where the cracked ground bent into a forgotten inlet, something wooden jutted from the silt. Not a tree, not debris. It was low, nearly swallowed by mud, a structure. Jeremy approached slowly, heart pounding in his throat. His radio clicked softly as he pressed the call button. Base, this is Echo 4. I've got a structure on the south lake bed. Looks like a boathouse. Not on any of the old topo maps. A static-filled response came back, measured but tense. Proceed with caution. Document everything. The building looked like it had grown from the earth itself. Roof sagging, shingles curled like leaves in flame. A faded sign, nearly lost to time, read, Lake Echo Boathouse. Established 1949. The door was sunken and sealed in hardened mud. He pried it open with both hands, the wood groaning like something exhumed from a grave. The air that rushed out hit him like a memory. Dust, mildew, and something else entirely. Not rot, something preserved. His flashlight pierced the dark. 7 beds lined the wall, each one child-sized, blankets tucked in with haunting precision. The room was too clean, the beds too made, the floor too unworn. It didn't feel like a ruin. It felt paused. Jeremy took a trembling step backward. Then he saw it. A camcorder, early VHS model, perched on a shelf near the far wall. It was plugged into a socket that should have been dead for decades. The red light blinked steadily. Record. He reached for it, fingers hovering. Then something shifted behind him, low and soft. Back at the Echo County Sheriff's Office, Detective Naomi Vega leaned against the break room counter, coffee cooling in one hand, her badge untouched on her desk. Fireworks cracked faintly in the distance as kids ran with sparklers and families laughed over grills. But Naomi hadn't smiled all day. July 4th marked 38 years since those kids had vanished. She was barely a rookie then, fresh out of training, wide-eyed and helpless. But she never forgot. Her phone buzzed. Echo 4 to base. I've got something strange down here. Notify the sheriff. Found a structure beneath the lake. Boathouse. Wasn't on the map. 7 beds. All child-sized. Still made. Looks like they've been waiting. Also, VHS camcorder. Still powered on. Still recording. Naomi didn't even finish her coffee. 25 minutes later, she was riding shotgun with Deputy Ray Harper. Dust trailing behind their cruiser as they raced toward what used to be Lake Echo. You think it's real? Harper asked, eyes on the horizon. 7 beds, a camcorder, a boathouse nobody's seen since Reagan was in office? She didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on the tree line where the lake once shimmered black under the moon. Now it was a cracked bowl of scorched earth and secrets no one expected to surface. The locals had blamed everything. Climate change, runoff mismanagement, a dam upstream. But no one thought the lake would vanish entirely. and no one thought it would give something back. They arrived at 8:19 p.m. The air was dry and electric. Naomi stepped from the cruiser, her boots crunching through powdered silt. Her skin prickled as she stared at the half-buried building. She didn't need to go inside to feel it, that deep, aching knowing in her chest. Something here was wrong. Not just strange, wrong. Jeremy was waiting near the entrance, pale as bone. "Didn't go past the second step," he said quickly. "Didn't feel right." She nodded and slipped past him into the building. The air was still and oddly cool. It wasn't musty. It wasn't dead. It was preserved, like a sealed tomb. 7 beds lined the wall, faded plaid blankets, perfectly tucked corners, untouched surfaces. No dust, no decay. She scanned the room slowly until her gaze settled on the center, where the old RCA camcorder still blinked red atop a tripod. "Harper," she whispered. He ducked in behind her. She raised a hand to stop him. "Don't touch anything. Call CSU. Call the FBI." Her eyes lifted to the back wall. There, carved just above the last bed in a child's uneven scrawl, was a name. Miriam. Naomi stepped back out into the heat, and for a moment it didn't feel hot at all. It felt broken. And in the distance, fireworks bloomed over Echo Ridge, their sounds fading into silence. Clouds thickened above Lake Echo, darkening the 4th of July sky into a grim swirl of blue-gray. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, like a warning whispered too late. Naomi Vega turned back toward the boathouse, its half-buried frame slouched in silence, as if it had been holding its breath for decades, watching, waiting. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone and dialed a number etched deep in memory. The FBI Cold Case Task Force hadn't heard from her in years. "This is Detective Naomi Vega, Echo County Sheriff's Office. We've reopened the Lake Echo 7. She waited by the structure until the forensics team arrived. The door remained propped open behind her, letting in the distant sound of fireworks that felt like an insult now, a celebration bleeding into a graveyard. The sun dipped behind the trees as the first drops of rain teased the horizon and the sky began to close like a lid. Inside, the air still hadn't shifted. No breeze moved through the warped boards. It was like stepping into a sealed memory. Naomi ducked beneath the bent lintel again, her boots pressing softly against the perfectly swept floor. The camcorder was still running, its motor humming, steady and surreal. She crouched behind the tripod, studying the frame. The lens pointed directly at the beds. 7 narrow, hand-built wooden frames, each identical. Same coarse wool blankets, same faded sheets, same washed-out pillows, uniform, impersonal. But the arrangement spoke volumes. This wasn't random. It wasn't storage. It was staged, preserved with purpose. A ritual, a shrine. "Detective Vega," called CSU lead Meredith Hahn as she entered, already gloved and carrying her clipboard. "You weren't kidding." "I don't kid," Naomi replied, her voice like gravel under pressure. Meredith began her slow circuit of the room, photographing, measuring. "The floorboards don't even creak," she murmured, sweeping dust into a sample tube. Shafts of light cut through the gaps in the slats, catching flecks of dust that hovered like suspended ash. "No rot, some mildew," she added, puzzled, "but very little for this kind of exposure." Naomi gestured toward the outlet behind the camcorder. "It still has power." Meredith crouched, frowning. "Looks like someone hardwired it into a separate power source, definitely not the grid. Could be a buried generator. We'll need to dig to confirm." Naomi's stomach turned again. The implications were too clean to ignore. Someone had maintained this room for decades. Harper leaned into the doorway, his silhouette framed by thickening storm clouds. "Storm's almost here. Weather Service says less than 2 hours till lightning hits the ridge." Naomi didn't hesitate. "Get what we can. Start with the beds, swab everything, lift prints, hair, fibers." I want this room documented from floorboard to rafter." "You sure you want to stay?" Harper asked gently. "We can lock it down, come back tomorrow." She turned, eyes hard and unwavering. "We've waited 38 years. I'm not leaving until I see what's on that tape." They wheeled in a portable VCR and backup generator, setting up a makeshift viewing station just outside the boathouse, in the center of the dry lake bed. Naomi stood with arms crossed, shoulders tight, while Harper fumbled with the inputs. The tape slid in. A click. Static. Then, video. Grainy footage flickered to life. A timestamp glowed faintly in the corner, July 2nd, 1985. Daylight. The lens jittered slightly with motion. Kids running along the lakeshore. Laughter. Names being called out by counselors. Naomi's breath caught in her chest. She knew that face. Darren Clemens, 11 years old. His photo had haunted newspapers that summer, but here he was, laughing, real. Then the tape jumped, static, then a hard cut. July 4th, 1985, 2:13 a.m. The scene now was the boathouse. Still, fixed angle. The same 7 beds, but now occupied. 7 small bodies, still and silent. Eyes closed, sleeping or drugged. Naomi moved closer to the screen, her heartbeat pounding in her throat. From the right, a figure entered the frame. Adult, male, tall, a counselor's uniform. In one hand, a mask. He moved bed to bed, placing a hand on each child's forehead. He whispered to the camera, inaudible. Then he turned and looked directly into the lens. Naomi's mouth went dry. "That's Langford," Harper muttered behind her. "Michael Langford, the head counselor. He died in a car crash, 1986. Closed casket. I remember the reports." She didn't blink. "You're sure?" "Positive." On screen, Langford raised a piece of paper toward the camera. Handwritten, 7 letters. "Come now." The footage cut to black. The tape ejected. Rain had begun falling, gently at first, then harder, thudding against the cruiser, the tin roof, the surface of the lake bed like a ticking clock. Naomi didn't move. She stood with her arms at her sides, watching the water drip from the brim of her hat. Someone had kept that power line working. Someone had cleaned those beds. Someone had waited for them to find it. "Do you think they were taken here first?" Harper asked quietly. Naomi shook her head. "No." "Then what?" She turned back toward the boathouse, eyes on the lightning crackling across the distant hills. "I think this wasn't the destination," she whispered. "I think this was the waiting room." The next morning broke gray and cold. The storm had passed, but the heaviness lingered in the air, like the world itself was in mourning. Down in the archives of the Echo County Sheriff's Department, Naomi stood alone. The fluorescent lights above buzzed against the silence. The room smelled of old paper, mold, and decades of unanswered questions. She opened a drawer labeled Cold Cases, Unsolved Children, and pulled out a heavy accordion file. The cover read, Camp Echo Disappearances, July 4th, 1985. 7 victims, presumed abducted. No remains. Case closed, unsolved. Last updated April 1992. She laid it open on a long metal table. The first page, a hand-drawn map of the camp. Cabins, trails, the lake, and a red X where the canoe had been found. Drifting empty, with a single carved word. She flipped past it, and there they were, mugshot-style photos. School. Portraits frozen in time. Darren Clemens, Miriam Caldwell, Trevor Hale, Leo and Marcus Silva, Emily Price, Noah Bendix. 7 kids, smiling awkwardly, unaware that their faces would one day haunt a case file in a dusty drawer. They had gone to bed like any other night. No screams, no footprints, no evidence. Except for one thing, Michael Langford, head counselor, the only adult to submit a timeline, the only one who claimed nothing unusual had happened. And now she had watched him walk among those beds nearly 4 decades after the case went cold. The file was thick with typewritten testimony and time-worn transcripts. Naomi flipped through them methodically, the cold language of bureaucracy doing little to hide the dread she felt reading Langford's own words. Campfire at 8. Lights out at 9:30. Bed checks at 10. Then, supposedly, he went to sleep in the staff cabin. His interview had been typed on a clunky machine, the kind that left letters uneven and ink smudged at the edges. "I can't explain how they got past us," he had said. "I checked every bed. No one saw anything. No one heard a thing." Langford passed a polygraph. The file noted that clearly. No charges were ever filed. He moved to Colorado the following year. Died in a car crash. Closed casket. But Naomi had seen him. Not in memory or record, but on tape. Walking among those beds, whispering to the camera like a man delivering a final sermon. She closed the file, pulse rising in her throat. This wasn't just an abduction case. Not anymore. The camcorder still working, the pristine preservation of the boathouse, and now this. Evidence too deliberate, too careful. It wasn't just a crime scene. It was a message. Maybe worse. A ritual unfinished. Naomi reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the object she hadn't mentioned in her initial report. A second VHS tape, this one taped beneath bed number 3. The handwriting on the folded note attached was uneven, faded with time, unmistakably written by a child. "For when they come back." She placed it gently into a padded evidence envelope and wrote in black marker, "Echo tape 02, recovered from boathouse." That tape would have to wait. Right now, she needed someone who knew Camp Echo better than anyone else ever could. Someone who had watched it from the inside. Loretta Mayfield had been the camp's nurse in 1985. She lived now in a small, vine-covered house on the edge of town. Her front yard had surrendered to wildflowers and creeping grass, the porch sagging under the weight of forgotten potted plants and a metal wind chime that never stopped whispering. When Naomi knocked, Loretta opened the door slowly. Her eyes were rimmed in red, her frame thin, as though time had been grinding her down from the inside. She didn't ask why Naomi was there. "You're here about the camp," she said simply. Naomi nodded. "I need your help. Something resurfaced." Loretta didn't respond. She just stepped back and let her in. The air smelled of lavender and chamomile, like a place frozen in peaceful resistance. On the mantel were photographs, kids from long ago, some smiling, some serious, none of them older than 12. Naomi could feel the years pressing down on the room like invisible smoke. "I kept what the county didn't want," Loretta said, motioning toward a blue plastic tote at the base of the bookshelf. "They took the files they could explain. I kept the ones they couldn't." Inside the bin were old attendance rosters, medical logs, schedules laminated and stained with age. Naomi found a folder marked in neat faded ink. Langford Observations. "You trusted him?" Naomi asked. Loretta stiffened, the words taking too long to form. "No," she said it flatly, without hesitation. "He was charming, controlled, always volunteered for overnight hikes, always chose which kids went with him, said he saw potential. Never let anyone else supervise." Inside the folder were notes, pages of them, written in a hand that shook with fear. Even now. Too affectionate. Constant contact. Refuses post-hike medical checks. Keeps private logbook, locked. And beneath it, a single note scribbled in red pen. Miriam, repeated nightmares. Claims he watches them sleep. Naomi's blood ran cold. "Why didn't you come forward in 85? "I did," Loretta whispered. "The sheriff told me I was being paranoid, said I had no kids of my own, that I didn't understand." Naomi leaned back, her mind racing. "What if I told you?" "I saw him, on tape. July 4th, 1985. Inside the boathouse, walking between the beds." Loretta didn't blink. Then he planned it. Every part driving back into town, rainwater still puddled in the ditches. Naomi called CSU. "Pull the camcorder. Catalog the internal tape as Exhibit A." And look for a power source. There's a generator buried somewhere near the boathouse. I want it found. Back at the lake, the southern stretch of cracked soil spread like brittle skin. CSU techs knelt over the earth with metal detectors, following the ridgeline. Naomi had marked the zone herself, 600 yards south of the boathouse, just past the stump of a tree that hadn't seen water in 30 years. Then came the sound, sharp and metallic. A ping. They called her over. Brushing away the dirt slowly, they revealed it. A rusted metal hatch, sealed tight, about 2 feet wide, buried where the water line used to be. Scratches lined the rim, signs of it being opened and resealed. Multiple times. Recently. Harper stood behind her, arms folded. "This what you were expecting?" Naomi shook her head, eyes locked on the hatch. "Number, but I'm not surprised." They pried it open. A metal lockbox sat inside, vented, heavy, and humming. Naomi touched it. Warm, not hot, still running. A faint smell rose, gas, oil, age. Inside, they found a modified generator, dust-covered except where wires had recently been connected. Meredith confirmed the worst. It was hand-built, old, functional, batteries replaced within the last 2 years. Someone had kept this alive. Someone had returned. "We found something else," Meredith added, holding up a sealed evidence bag. A military dog tag, rusted but legible. Langford M., USMC 312579844. Naomi clenched her jaw. He was never in the military. He said he was. Told the kids it gave him authority. "This one looks planted," Meredith said softly. Naomi stared at it. "It's not a message," she said. "It's a claim." That evening, word had already begun to ripple beyond Echo County. Naomi sat inside her cruiser with a video call open on her tablet. Special Agent Nora Raines, from the Portland FBI field office, watched from the other side. A seasoned woman, mid-50s, face lined with too many sleepless nights and too many unsolved names. "You think the kids were held there?" Raines asked. "They were there," Naomi said, voice firm. "We recovered tapes. One from July 4th, 1985. They were alive. We saw them." Raines leaned forward, her tone cooling. "You said tapes, plural." Naomi nodded slowly. "Yes, we found a hidden stash under one of the beds, at least a dozen, all labeled by name, indexed, date-stamped." Sequential Raines closed her eyes for a moment. "Jesus, that's not random. That's structure, organization, catalog level." Naomi felt the weight of it settle into her chest. "There's one more," she added quietly. Unlabeled. The tape was found hidden beneath the thin mattress of the last bed, wrapped in plastic, labeled only with a line scribbled in what looked like crayon. "For when they come back." But Naomi didn't believe it was meant for the children. "It wasn't about them returning," she said quietly, her eyes locked on the rain-streaked glass of the precinct windows. "It was about us. Someone planned for us to find this." Later that night, she and Harper returned to the station, the unmarked VHS secured inside an evidence cooler like something toxic. The forensics team handled it with the delicacy of a bomb, cleaning the tape head, preparing the equipment. Harper stood in the corner, arms folded, jaw tense. "I've got a bad feeling about this one," he muttered. Naomi didn't answer. She just hit play. The screen flickered to life. The same boathouse. But it looked different. Emptier. Only one bed remained, centered in the frame like a spotlight. A girl sat on it, arms wrapped around her knees, slowly rocking. Blonde hair hung in tangled strands. A stuffed rabbit lay limp in her lap. Naomi froze. Miriam. She would know that face anywhere. The same girl from the case file. The one whose name had been carved into the boathouse wall. The timestamp read, July 8th, 1985, 4:11 a.m. The camera remained static. The audio hissed softly. Then a voice. Male, calm, deliberate. "Miriam, tell them what happened. So they know, so they believe. The girl didn't respond at first. When she finally did, it was barely a whisper. "The lake takes us when it's ready." Naomi's heart clenched. "He told us we were chosen," Miriam continued, eyes still downcast. "Said if we stayed quiet, if we obeyed, the water would let us live forever." A pause. Then her voice broke. But it lied. She turned slowly toward the camera. One eye swollen shut, a dark bruise spreading across her cheek. But it was her expression that chilled Naomi. It wasn't fear or pain. It was surrender. "He's coming back soon," Miriam said. "And if you're watching this, then you're next." The screen went black. Silence suffocated the room. Harper cleared his throat, barely above a whisper. "Jesus Christ." Naomi stood slowly, blood thudding in her ears. "We reopen everything," she said. "Not just the boathouse, every structure, every trail, every inch of Camp Echo." As Harper moved to relay orders, one of the CSU techs called from across the room. "Detective, we ran serials on the camcorder and generator, different years, but same credit card." He handed her the printout. Caleb Langford. Born August 12, 1986. Naomi's breath caught. Michael Langford died in 1986, but now there was someone walking around with his name, someone continuing his work. The next morning, Naomi and Harper stood outside a storage unit in Bend, Oregon. Unit 209. Rented since 2011, paid in cash. The clerk didn't ask questions, just handed them the key with a face drained of color when he heard the name Camp Echo. The metal door groaned as it lifted. Inside was not what they expected. No boxes, no furniture, a folding table, rows of metal shelves lined with VHS tapes and discs, each labeled with clinical precision, a small TV VCR combo, and in the far corner, a child's cot with crisp white sheets. Naomi stepped in, every instinct on edge. The silence in the unit felt engineered. Too still. The tapes were arranged by decade. 1985 to 1992, then nothing, then 2013 to 2023. It wasn't just an archive. It was a timeline. She scanned the labels. Names, dates. One caught her immediately. Miriam, Volume 31, July 10th, 1985. Then another, Miriam, Final, July 14th. But beneath them, newer names. Rowan, March 2014. Madison, August 2019. Sophie, July 3rd, 2023. Naomi's stomach twisted. "Get CSU," she whispered. Now. An hour later, Bend PD turned the unit into a crime scene. Naomi stayed, watching silently as they uncovered a black duffel behind the shelf. Inside, a digital camera, 3 SD cards, a pair of pink canvas sneakers, size 12, a child's torn denim jacket with a faded patch. Camp Echo, established 1949, and a sealed envelope. Naomi opened it with tweezers. Inside was a note, written in heavy black ink. "You were warned. The water keeps what it's owed. The lake never gave them up. You did. But it's hungry again, and we have her. No name, no return address, no fingerprints, just that." Naomi sat in the cruiser, staring down at the paper, hands trembling. Not from fear, from fury. For 38 years, everyone believed the lake had swallowed the children. But it hadn't. It had delivered them. To someone who called himself Langford. That night she called Special Agent Rains. "I want every unsolved missing child case reopened within 200 miles of Echo County, from 2012 to now." Rains didn't argue. "Organized trafficking?" she asked. Naomi shook her head. "Number, this isn't commerce. It's ritual. Controlled. Patterned." Rains hesitated. "Then what's he trying to do?" Naomi looked out the motel window. A crescent moon hung low over the hills. "He's trying to finish what Michael started. Across the state, in a dark windowless room, A man sat before 7 monitors, 7 beds, 7 cameras, each feed humming in low-resolution static. On screen 3, a child stirred. A girl, long dark hair, sat up slowly. The man leaned forward, pressed record. "You're awake, Sophie," he whispered. "Good girl." Back at Camp Echo, the forest had taken over. Ivy wrapped itself around old cabins. Tree roots split the walkways. The old mess hall was half swallowed by growth. The sign out front hung by one rusted nail. The word "Welcome" faded to dust. Harper stood beside Naomi, staring at the rot. "It's like the place tried to bury itself, or hide something," she replied. They had returned with cadaver dogs, a tactical team, and blueprints recovered from the archives. Naomi wasn't looking for what was lost. She was looking for what had been intentionally left behind. In the third cabin, Harper called out. She found him crouched near the closet. A floor panel had been disturbed. Beneath it, a locked hatch. The lock was new. Too new. SWAT cut it open. A narrow stairwell led underground. The air was unnaturally cold. At the bottom, a concrete room, 10 feet by 15, one desk, one chair, and a corkboard covered in satellite maps, trails, lake contours, and photographs, dozens, children, portraits, candids, park photos, street crossings. At the bottom corner of the board was a note. 7 beds, 7 children, always. The lake chooses. We obey. Naomi shivered. "He's planning another cycle," she said, "or it's already begun." They found another hatch beneath cabin B. Restraints bolted to the floor. The bathhouse used recently. Soap wrappers under a year old. Behind the shed, they found a fire pit. Burned journals, melted toys, bones too small to be anything but human. By dusk, the dogs caught a scent trail leading northeast. It ended at a locked gate. Painted across it in white. "We serve the water." That night, Naomi studied every map again. All roads led to the lake. But one, an old geological survey, showed something else. A sealed settler cellar, marked on a ridge before the lake was created. Buried now, beneath the caretaker's cabin. And that cabin was the one tied to Langford's credit card. Naomi sat back, breath caught in her throat. They'd never searched the cellar. At 2:37 a.m., her phone rang. The call came just before dawn. Naomi, still half-dressed in yesterday's clothes, picked up the phone with a hollow voice. It was Meredith from forensics. Her tone wasn't panicked, just stunned. "We got a fingerprint match," she said. "From inside the cassette cover." Naomi sat upright. "You told me the prints were smudged." "One wasn't," Meredith replied. "It was clean, deep, probably from someone loading the tape by hand." Naomi already felt it before she heard the name. "It belongs to someone who shouldn't be alive," Meredith said. Naomi swallowed hard. "Who?" "Michael Langford." The name hit like a stone through glass. By morning, the air was hot and still, as if the world itself was bracing for what was coming. Naomi stood before the caretaker's cabin, staring at the flagstone foundation. Unlike the others, it hadn't collapsed. The porch sagged, but the brass nameplate still shone in the morning light. "Monsieur Langford." Harper stood behind her. "Your boogeyman had a mailbox." Naomi didn't laugh. The geological survey in her hand marked this spot with a red X. Settler cellar, sealed 1891. Camp Echo had been built right over it. That had never been a coincidence. Langford had known. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and age. Too clean. No cobwebs on the mantel. A ceramic mug sat on the table like someone had just stepped out for a walk. They searched the kitchen, the bedroom. Empty. But behind the pantry, Naomi found it, a seam in the wall. Hollow. She pried it open with her multi-tool. A stairwell stretched into darkness. Langford's rabbit hole. Harper drew his weapon. Naomi flicked on her flashlight. "Always," she said. They descended, 20 feet. Carved into stone, The air grew colder, denser. At the bottom, a vaulted room opened up. Stone walls, handmade, no mortar. But it had been modernized. Electrical wires, PVC pipes, low bulbs strung from the ceiling. A steel cot bolted to one wall. A table in the center with 3 chairs. One small, child-sized. Naomi turned slowly, taking in the drawings. Chalk figures, children holding hands by a lake. A man with a square head, 7 beds, a son with no face. Then another image. The man standing beside a church, water rising around it. Beneath it, in block letters, the lake knows. "Vega," Harper called. At the back of the room, a humming freezer. "Locked." Naomi nodded. He pried it open. Inside, plastic bags, each labeled in black ink. Hair, Miriam. Tooth, Trevor. Fingernail, Sophie. Naomi reeled. These weren't trophies. They were inventory. Nearby, journals lay stacked like sacred texts. Langford's handwriting filled every page. The lake requires 7. It always has. 7 to bind, 7 to feed, 7 to complete the cycle. The room must be pink. Always pink. Naomi's breath caught. The rooms weren't arbitrary. They were stages, ritualistic environments, psychological conditions tailored to obedience. Langford hadn't acted alone. He'd been a custodian of something older, an ideology wrapped in delusion. "We're not looking at one man," she whispered. Harper nodded. "This was passed down." "Langford started it," Naomi said, "but Caleb's trying to finish it." "Do you think Sophie's still alive?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. They called in an excavation team. 2 hours later, the forensics team uncovered more. Child-sized clothes with blood traces, 14 tapes in a wooden crate, handcuffs still latched, and beneath the cot, a hidden envelope marked Final Cycle, 2023. Inside, a child's drawing, the 7 beds of the boathouse. Only 1 bed was occupied. The figure had X's for eyes. That night, Naomi sat before a whiteboard covered in notes. Every thread of the case, all connected. 1985, 7 kids vanish. 1986, Langford dies. Closed casket. 2013 to 2023, new tapes begin. And now, Sophie, 1 child alive, 6 unaccounted for. She stared at the old camp map, then at the one structure they hadn't yet searched, the equipment shed. In the margin, in red ink, barely visible, 7 go in. Only 1 must return. Across the state, in a room lit only by a flickering television, a man watched the evening news. Sophie's photo filled the screen. He smiled, crossed out her name. Then, slowly, wrote a new one. Naomi. Dream begins. At Portland Children's Hospital, Naomi stood outside room 314. Sophie lay in the hospital bed, eyes closed, heart monitor pulsing in steady rhythm. She hadn't spoken since whispering, "I was the last dream." It wasn't the words that haunted Naomi. It was how calmly Sophie had said them. No fear, only belief. Dr. Morse stood quietly beside Naomi, eyes clouded with fatigue and something softer, concern. "No evidence of recent physical abuse," she said. "But we're seeing clear signs of long-term psychological conditioning." Naomi's gaze never left Sophie. "Stockholm?" Morse shook her head slowly. "Worse. It's deeper. Groomed belief systems, reinforced patterns, ritualized behaviors. She doesn't cry. She doesn't ask for her parents. She flinches when you turn off the lights, not when someone touches her. She wasn't just hurt, Naomi. She was shaped." Naomi's voice dropped to a whisper. "She was trained. Conditioned," Morse corrected softly. "She was made to believe the lake wasn't something to fear. It was something to serve." Naomi stepped closer to the glass. "Can I try?" "She responds to you," Morse said. "She knows your face. Just go slow." Inside the room, Naomi pulled a chair close and sat gently by Sophie's bed. The girl's eyes opened immediately, clear, focused, like she hadn't truly been asleep. Naomi offered a small smile. "Hey, sweetheart." Sophie blinked once, slowly. "I brought you something," Naomi said, lifting a drawing pad and a box of markers. Sophie reached for it with no hesitation, choosing a pink marker first. Then she began to draw. There was no pause, no searching. Her lines were deliberate. 7 beds, 1 door, a camera in the corner. Naomi leaned forward. "Is that where he kept you?" Sophie nodded. Then she flipped the page and drew Naomi, outside the door, holding a flashlight. Sophie added a word beneath the sketch in pink marker. "Last." Later, in the sterile hum of the hospital cafeteria, Naomi met Rains. The agent looked worse than before. Dark circles, a limp in her voice. She slid a file across the table. Naomi opened it. Gas station surveillance, a man at a payphone, faded flannel, baseball cap, duffel bag over his shoulder. The timestamp burned into the bottom of the frame. "It's him," Rains confirmed. "Michael Langford. Voice and facial structure confirmed. Matched to the boathouse footage." Naomi stared at the image. Older, weathered, but the eyes hadn't aged. Cold, measured, inhuman. "How did we miss this for 38 years?" she asked. Rains exhaled, because he didn't want to be found. Back at the station, Harper was waiting. "2 more kids are gone." Naomi froze. "Siblings. Backyard camping. The tent was empty this morning. No signs of struggle." Her heart dropped. "And?" He handed her a photo. A VHS tape, left on the picnic table, labeled in thick block letters, "Cycle 2 begins." By the next morning, Sophie's room was wallpapered in drawings. One in particular chilled Naomi. 7 doors, 6 open, 1 closed. Sophie nodded when Naomi asked if she knew where he was, then picked up a red marker, a jagged cliff, a tower, a cross. Naomi recognized the cross, not religious. It was the old Firewatch Tower above Lake Echo. She called Harper. "Gear up," she said. "We found him." The raid on the tower was surgical. 1 heat signature, motionless. Naomi climbed the stairs herself. At the top, an empty room. A static-filled screen looped boathouse footage. A message scrawled on the wall. "The lake knows your name, Naomi. The cycle has already begun." She didn't sleep that night. She paced the mobile command center while storm clouds bruised the sky. Langford had escaped. Again. But Meredith called with news. "That tape left behind wasn't video," she said. "It was audio, reversed." Naomi sat down. A voice, chanting, 7 phrases, 7 names. Naomi's voice cracked. "Were the new children on it?" "1 girl, the rest." Meredith paused. "They're all girls, all ages 7 to 11, all missing since 1985. Later, Harper and a K-9 unit tracked the siblings sent deep into the northern woods. At a clearing, burned campfire, discarded pack, spiral etched into the dirt." Naomi crouched. "Same as the cellar, same as Sophie's drawings. This is ceremonial." Drag marks led to a storm culvert. Naomi crawled through the dark until she found it. A waterlogged Polaroid. Sophie in the pink room, smiling faintly. But in the mirror behind her, another man. Taller, younger. Naomi's blood ran cold. It wasn't just Langford. Back at HQ, she reviewed every file, every drawing, the mirror, the double voice. The evidence was there. Langford had a successor, a student. She called Rains. "Check every man, age 35 to 55, with park access, Langford connections, or missing identity history." That evening, Sophie whispered another truth. "It wasn't the lake man," she said. "It was the red man. He wore a fox mask." Naomi remembered. A red mask found in the boathouse. She returned to the culvert that night. Found a second tunnel. At the end, another ritual chamber. 6 empty beds, a camera, a message in red chalk. 6 dreams gone. 1 more to wake. Then the lake sleeps again. Miles away, in the woods, the red man prepared the final ritual. Naomi moved fast. Within hours, thermal drones picked up heat near a bunker hidden beneath the moss. Inside, Naomi found the siblings, sedated on a makeshift altar. The red man raised a blade. "Don't," she said. He turned, smiling beneath the fox mask. "You came early. The dream wasn't done. But it was. Harper's shot hit him square. The children were saved." Back at the station, Harper handed Naomi the name. Elias Boone. Former Firewatch. No priors. Off-grid for years. Langford's final recruit. In the hospital, Sophie drew one last image. 7 doors, one still open. "He left something behind," she whispered, "something inside." Naomi returned to the boathouse at dawn. Beneath the floorboards, she found a VHS marked Naomi Dream 7. The footage showed her, 8 years old, smiling at the lake. A voice behind the camera. "Say your name for the lake." "Naomi Vega. You are Dream 7. You belong to the water." Naomi staggered back. She wasn't just a survivor. She was part of it. Her mother had once volunteered at Camp Echo. She'd pulled Naomi out early. No records kept. No one remembered. Except Langford. He remembered everything. That night, Sophie woke screaming. "There's one more," she cried. "He's still under the water." Rangers found the final chamber beneath the lake. Inside, one coffin, a girl, stuffed bear, camp bracelet, Miriam Langford, Dream 1. Naomi stood over the coffin, realization settling like a stone. Langford hadn't just built a cycle. He had built a resurrection. 7 dreams to bring his daughter back. But the final vessel, Naomi, had escaped. At dawn, Sophie drew one last picture. Naomi standing in the lake. And beneath her, Miriam's reflection, smiling. The rains returned. The lake began to rise. Naomi watched from the ridge, mist in her hair. The investigation was over. The files were sealed. But Naomi knew better. The lake never forgets. 1 month later, hikers found a Polaroid nailed to the ranger station door. A little girl in shallow water, smiling. And behind her, Naomi, eyes closed.